Cherise. Thank you so much for joining us today on Unconversations. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I am so happy to be interviewing you today. I'm excited about you joining us and joining me and getting our audience to learn more about you and Dapper Boy. So, first and foremost, I just would like to do an introduction, if you don't mind. I am thrilled to announce Cherise Pasha. She is co founder and COO of Dapper Boy. She brings resilience and passion for inclusivity to the fashion industry. With a background in higher education, management, and sales, she co founded Dapper Boy to cater to gender and body inclusive apparel needs, inspired by her wife Vicky's journey. Balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship, which is, I'm sure, not easy. Cherise navigated business challenges like the pandemic, supply chain disruptions, even selling their home to sustain their business. Her leadership as COO drove Dapper Boy to significant growth, culminating over 4.5 million in sales and recognition on ABC Shark Tank and Out 100 2023 lists.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
Sharice champions diversity, featured in the documentary Show Her the Money, advocating for equitability funding. Her and her family are based in San Diego. She enjoys family time with Vicky and their twin daughters. Thank you again, Cherise, for joining me today. Is there anything you'd like to add to that introduction?
I gotta just bring you everywhere to introduce me because that was like that was yeah. We actually just recently were on CBS Morning with Oprah's best friend, Gail King, and that was such a surreal moment. And we're just so passionate about spreading Dapper Boy's story because it's all about not just representation, but there's plenty of people that don't know about Dapper Boy. So if we could reach more audiences, or even if it doesn't resonate with somebody watching, they're going to know somebody that's going to need a brand like Dapper Boy in their life. So that was really exciting as well.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. And people I'm sure would probably be able to YouTube
Yep.
that interview. And that took place on what date?
Gosh, it was
Was that
Yeah, it was, I think, June 26th, so just a couple weeks ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Well, I again appreciate your time and thank you for bringing that up. I will absolutely check that out
Thank
myself.
you.
So you and I spoke, and how we kind of sort of wanted to break the ice sort of during this podcast and to give our audience an opportunity to get to know you as a person. You're more than just a COO of an amazing company. You're also a person, a mother. And I asked for you to think about three
Yeah.
unwords that you felt really describes you. Do you mind going over those for
Yeah,
us?
first, I wanna say thank you for giving me the opportunity to really, dig deep and, give some deep thought to these words because it makes you think about yourself, in all of the roles that you play and what kind of unwords really embody you. The first one that I picked is unconditional. And when I think about that from before I was a mom, I was a partner. And Vicky and I started with my business idea. So I had this crazy business idea, and I heard that Vicky had marketing experience through mutual friends. So I asked her to kind of, get started on this crazy venture that I had. And we had started off in business. So starting Dapper Boy, she had approached me on our honeymoon and said, I have this crazy idea. And it just felt like deja vu, from our beginnings and how we had gotten started. So I had no idea when I said yes, what yes really meant, but I knew it unconditionally because, you know, when I think about this business, it's like most people conceive their first child on their honeymoon, and I say that we conceived our first baby, I really consider Dapper Boy our first baby. And when I said yes to Vicky, like we have never looked back. I always said like yes all the way. And I feel like, when you have these like big moments in your life as partners, or even as parents, and how your roles evolve, like in your relationship, there can't be conditions to these moments. It has to be like yes all the way. So that's what I mean by unconditional. And I totally have found what the meaning of that has been over the last like 10+ years. Yeah, also, like, as a mom, our, journey to becoming parents, obviously, you can't have an oopsie baby as 2 women, so, everything, our heart and souls that we put into being moms is, like, everything's just so intentional with our daughters, Reese and Tori, and we actually named them after the 2 of us, Reese after me and Tori after Victoria. I wanted to do Charisse Jr., but Vicky was like, no, too far. I don't know. I feel like that could have been a cool like lineage, but yeah. So we
That
have
could have been
Reese.
one of your words in unconventional.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So
So your first one was unconditional, definitely for your wife, kids, and family. And
yes,
then you sent me, and then another one I thought was really interesting was unforgettable.
yeah.
What does that word mean to you?
It's personally, I feel like it's so interesting. When I was younger, I was like always life of the party, the loudest person in the room. And that's how I define like unforgettable, like in your face. But I think, as I grow older and maybe a little bit more mature, being a mom, I think it's being unforgettable in the sense that like, in one-on-one interpersonal relationships, many people don't have the characteristic of really listening, especially with like social media and asking questions and having like the actual curiosity to get to know other people. And that's why I love conversations like this, because it is like a genuine, like active listening, which most people don't have that quality
Yes.
anymore. We're either like way too distracted with social media or instant gratification, or we're always thinking about the next thing to say without like really taking the time to like make eye contact and all those things. So I think when I think about unforgettable, it's being intentional in like conversations, listening, hearing, um, and not providing feedback with like that's gonna benefit me the most. And just really the exchange of words, I think, is a lost communication skill. So I think that's unforgettable. And then
Your third one, unstoppable. I think that one we'll probably be talking a lot about.
yeah, um, you know, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but during the COVID supply chain issues, so many businesses were completely wiped out. It was the
Yes.
small businesses like ours. And even statistically, before COVID was even an issue, most businesses don't make it past the 5-year mark. And I was reading somewhere that less than 2% of businesses even hit $1 million in revenue. And, I think that it's taken both myself and my wife, Vicky, as leaders to really dig deep because I think they say this in your personal life, and this definitely translates into business. It's not like it's you're not defined by how you move when things are going well. It's when things aren't going well. Like, how are you going to respond to that? What are you going to do to, you know, um, make your situation better? Like, I think that we could have easily like hid under our desk, crawled in a hole, or even worse, gone back to our 9 to 5,
Sure.
and gone back to things that we felt comfortable in. But when, you know, we decided to be unstoppable and push through, invest in ourselves, and I know that we can dive into that a little bit deeper. But it also has to. I think this also intersects with, like, being a parent, because when we did decide to sell our home, it was like, wow, this is a moment where being a founder and being a parent, that one decision is gonna affect both. And, we decided to sell our home, and it has made us unstoppable because it just truly shows that not only are we willing to invest in ourselves, but this is how much we believe in our brand.
Serious, I think that's I would love to transition right there. I absolutely appreciate you sharing that,
Yeah.
and one to be able to share that, because a lot of people who are in executive levels, such as yourself, showing that type of vulnerability is not easy, but it also can bring such great success. And I would love if we could too to kind of continue with. I know you and Vicky started the company. The pandemic was unkind to a lot of people. I can relate to that myself. So I absolutely am feeling and understanding you. Do you mind starting kind of your story there? How long was the business, and if you're comfortable sharing, you and Vicky sitting down, I don't know if a glass of wine was involved in that or not. uh, but really, what was that moment? Because that probably was a pivotal time, or sounds like it may be a pivotal time of, do we keep going? Or, as you said, do we go back to the 9 to 5? Do you mind starting your story there? Would that be a good place?
Yeah, I can even take it a little bit further and give some context on Dapper Boys.
Please.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
started in 2015. It really started with my wife's journey. So she cut off her hair, and I think for a lot of people that are a little bit more masculine presenting, or even in the LGBTQ space, it's like you want to, when you come out, you want to have almost this. It is a whole moment. You She cut off her hair, and she was wearing and shopping in the men's department. And although she felt more comfortable in men's clothing and that aesthetic, it still didn't fit her. She felt frumpy, she felt unseen, she felt like less confident. uh,
Hmm.
and so when it had really evolved from her at work, the clothes didn't fit her. And when we first started dating, I love fashion, I love clothes, I love shopping, it's my favorite form of cardio. And so I was like, I like, I can't be like dating a frumpy wearing clothes wearing lady. I thought that I could go to a department store, pick out clothes for her, and we would be one and done. However, I brought it home, didn't fit her, and that's when I really started to empathize with her situation. So when she had approached me on our honeymoon, said, I have this crazy idea for a brand, I was all in. And so, you know, in the early days, I feel like when we first started Dapper Boy, we went all in, and it started with like the immediate sacrifice. And what I mean by that is, at that point, we both had very successful jobs. Vicky was a marketing executive at a casino. I was in
Wow.
higher education in an upper management position. And what we decided to do was, we had a 4-bedroom condo. We decided to downsize into a 1-bedroom beach shack. And she quit her job, and I was working full time,
Wow.
just so she could put 100% focus into the business. So that was in 2015. We started on Kickstarter. We surpassed our funding goal there. Our goal was 18,000. We got to 26,000. We're like, wow, there is.
Congratulations.
Thank you. There's a need for a brand like ours. So we sell out of those, and we're like, oh my goodness, like, what are we going to do? Like, that was good for the first production. And then we're like, oh, now we really got to put our business hats on. And that's when we started to dive into it, from like jeans to button ups to all these things. You fast forward, 5 years later, we're still going strong. And then, from 2015 to 2020, we're just on this upward trajectory. And then COVID hits. In the middle of that, like 2000, I think We had our babies in 2018, 2019. We bought a home.
Wow.
Like, we were just like, I felt like the American dream. Everything was going well.
Sure.
2020 hit, COVID. Oh my goodness. We're like, what is going to happen? However, things didn't slow down for us. People were at home. I think there was a lot of reflective moments for people. We
Sure.
definitely got a lot of customer stories reaching out to us saying, you know, um, I'm so glad that I found your brand. Like, I was going through a lot of like depression, anxiety, because I felt so alone. And once I found your brand, like, I mean, we've had people saying, like, I've had suicidal thoughts, but now I don't feel alone. Like, your ads, your brand makes me feel seen. Like, it's incredible the things that we've heard from
If
our
you
customers.
don't mind me asking, Sheree, that is such a tremendous amount of responsibility. How did you and Vicky feel? There's one thing about making sales, which is wonderful. And
Yeah.
then there's the other side where you're making such a personal and valuable impact in someone's life. How did that resonate with the two of you, or you specifically?
Yeah, it's a heavy weight to carry and something that we do not take lightly.
Mhm.
And it hits me even more as a mom. That's why we continue to push, and because our dream is that we are making the moves now for a brand like ours to exist. If
Mhm.
we simply said, okay, we're going to stop and not be unstoppable, um,
Yes.
it would just be so validating to those people that are like, you know what, it's true, I don't need confidence, I don't need clothes that are going to fit me. Like, it would be so detrimental to our customers, and that's our why. And so it is so important to us. It's This brand has to go on because we're a mission. We
Absolutely.
depend on us. It's more than just clothing. Everybody has that pair of jeans or that outfit that when you wear it, you feel unstoppable, because we truly believe when you feel good and look good, you do good.
That's a very, very powerful statement to say. And when you were just talking about, especially with the LGBTQ plus community, to have you and Vicky to be able to just be more than fashion, and I just love the mission about that, and that's why I wanted to ask you about. That's a huge amount of responsibility, and I'm sure the community is very thankful for that. So
Yeah.
with so after the pandemic, so
Yeah.
what
2020 is going well. 2021, yeah, that was like, okay, this is when 2020 people are at home. They have, a little bit more disposable income. They're shopping more, and we're doing well. Like, our sales are there. And then 2021, that's when all of the supply chain issues started happening. So the way that we were able to bootstrap our brand ourselves, is we would do pre-orders. And so people would pre-order, we would kind of get those funds up front, and then the production would come in maybe like 4 to 6 weeks later, and then we would ship them their product. And that really worked for us. Our customers were super excited. We would sell out, like, people, like, and then, when the supply chain issues happen, like, once you have this wheel going, you just need one thing to cog up the
yeah.
wheel, and then
Yeah.
everything is like falls apart. For us, it was the supply chain issues. And, we had customers that were 4, 5, 6 campaigns deep, and at that point, they hadn't gotten their product for like 8, 9, 10 months, and we couldn't ethically launch any more products. We started drowning, and then we got into a situation where we had to get these MCA predatory loans, and that can be detrimental for a business, right?
Mm.
So then everything started stacking up, and we were like, oh my goodness, like, we have run out of money. And it became a very scary time. We tried to do as much as possible. 2022, we were at about like 55% of what our sales were the year prior, um, with no new launches, which is good. It's not great. Um, so at the same time, we're filming this documentary called Show Her the Money. And we have these cameras in our face, like,
Was this
going
happening at the same was this happening all at the same time? Oh
through
my goodness. Wow.
was just so interesting that they were following our lives during the most crazy time of like, okay, what's going on with the business? What are we gonna do? So we have cameras in our face constantly following us around in our day to day.
Oh my
At the same time, a year prior, we had applied for Shark Tank. We get a call from Shark Tank saying, hey, you guys might be like the perfect brand to come on. And so we're also preparing for Shark Tank at the same time, and that's a very long audition process. And then at the same time, Vicky is sitting me down and saying, like, I don't know what we're gonna do. Like, I think that we may need to sell our home. So what ends up happening
what was that moment like? Because if you go back and here you were on your honeymoon that, hey, we're about to birth this company and now you're at this stage.
Mhm.
You're the COO of this company. Your wife's the CEO. You're doing this together.
Yeah.
What was that moment like?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
so many, but yeah, I mean, that's something a lot of executives go through. I'd love if you could dig just a little deep if you're comfortable sharing a bit of that.
for sure. Yeah, so at this point, I had been, um we started the business 2015. I had left my job in like 2000, mid 2017, 2018. Our girls were born early 2018. So we had decided that I would be a stay at home mom. And during naps and late at night is when I would do social media and do as much as I could with the business. So at this point in like 2022, I was only in a full time capacity for like a year. Prior to us having this conversation, we had to let go of all contractors. We had to let go of our part time employees, and it was just it was me and Vicky, and then we had one part time employee with us. And we're sitting around and we're going through this exercise, and we were goal setting. So we're doing this goal setting of where do we see ourselves in, you know, a month from now, 6 months from now,
Sure.
a year from now, and we're going all the way up, and then we reverse engineer it. And we're like, okay, so where do we see ourselves in 10 years? Okay, well, what would happen if Dapper Boy didn't exist? Oh
What a
my gosh,
question to
yeah.
ask.
Where would we be in 1 month? Where would we be in 3 years, 10 years? Like, not only would that have an impact on us, but what would that impact be on our customers, right? And so that was such a gut punch to us. I still get emotional thinking about it because there was not a dry eye in the room. And when I say that, like, this was like so emotional for us because I have this saying of like, we always said, okay, we left that room and we said plan A all the way. And what I mean by that is, and the word unconditional in the business
Hmm.
sense is, if you are even putting the slightest thought into plan B, then you're not 100% in.
Sure.
It's almost like running a half marathon and giving up at the last mile. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just push through? Right? And so when you think about it in the like bigger picture, we've come so far. And at this point too, we were also like in the stage early stages of like fundraising and seeking investors and starting those conversations. I said to Vicky, like, being a first generation Filipino, like I've always kind of been in that mindset of like um, my parents sacrificed and like they really wanted me to be a nurse or a doctor or, a lawyer and typical things. They definitely didn't think that I would give up the stability of like an upper management job with 401k pension, all these things.
Right.
And like so many unconventional ways that I went about my life. But I think that is what the American dream is investing in yourself and your dreams. I can make my own legacy for my children. And, I really feel like it was meant to be for us to have a home, be sitting on all that equity and being able to invest in ourselves. Because how could we ask investors to invest in us if we didn't believe in ourselves to invest in,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. Charisse, when
So,
you were all sitting at that table, and everyone is obviously very emotional because this company means so much to everybody. How did that transition? So you're sitting there. What was the moment that said, "Wait, hold on a minute, we're not going to do that," to where you kind of transitioned out of that and said, "No, we're going to keep moving forward and be unstoppable and keep going on that train,"
yeah.
and especially with cameras as well, because that's a very vulnerable time too. I'd be interested in that as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So Vicky's a smart lady. She totally set me up. I feel like we went from that exercise into having our conversation about it because she had brought it up, and I was kind of the stopper because it's that moment, like I was saying, where you there's decisions in our lives being parents and founders where the two intersect. It's like this one decision is going to affect the business and our family. And so I always like to say Vicky is the big boss at Dapper Boy and I'm the biggest boss at home,
Yes.
And so I was putting a stop to it and I said, like, this is our home. This is where my kids learned how to like our kids learned how to walk here. And it just felt so like I was holding on to these like these things. Um and so I
When you
kind of
say things, was that things holding you back from continuing, or did you want to continue?
the idea of the home, I didn't want to let it go. I was
Understood.
stuck
Sure.
with the mindset of like, no, this is our home. Like you can't take everything. However, you know, I did we talked about that exercise again and we talked about like what could this mean for us being able to invest in our business and be able to really make some moves so that we can ensure that Dapper Boy continues to live on. So we decided to sell our home, and I can 100% say it is the best decision that we have made.
Wow.
um, but it was so hard. And I will say that during that time, we're also filming for Shark Tank. So this is crazy. So in the documentary, it follows four founders and their journey of seeking funding and what that experience has been like because less than 2% of women receive venture capital funding. It
Yeah.
is terrible. And
It is a
they
very big problem. Very
very,
big problem.
very big problem, big gap. And, they caught that moment on camera, seeing us have that conversation. It definitely is emotional. But what I will say is, as we are living that moment, we're all in this social media world. And I love all things social media from a personal standpoint. And, for the business, social media is so important. While I'm sharing on my social media that we're selling our home, I think everybody had this perception that, wow, Charisse is doing really well. They must be upgrading their home. And
Oh,
I let
wow.
them think that, you know?
Mhm.
Again, like I was saying, at the same time, we're filming for Shark Tank. We're going through the audition process. It's a very long process. You go through many, many rounds, and the pool of like potentials kind of bottlenecks, and we were at the final stages. And I remember, we're doing our final audition in our empty rental. So at the same time as like applying for Shark Tank, going through all of that, like doing everything we can for the business, selling our home, we also have to look for a rental. I'm in the middle of an empty rental with moving boxes everywhere. We're doing our final audition. As a matter of fact, like the day that we actually went on set on Shark Tank, um, was the day that we were doing an open house. And we're like looking at our Ring app, like, how many people are coming to the open house? Oh my gosh. Because that first weekend, we wouldn't have been able to make rent on our rental. That's how tight our timeline was. It was just like everything was like white knuckle anxiety. Like, is everything going to work out? Um, but yeah, everything did work out. That's the spoiler to the story. Everything did work out and everything has been in an upward trajectory. But it does feel like, on a social media sense, like I was saying, I always felt like, okay, I can make these decisions privately, with Vicky. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine being on podcasts or these huge stages and telling our story, let alone like Shark Tank. And I kind of had this epiphany, like, when they told us what our air date was, I looked at Vicky and I said, oh my goodness, the whole world is going to find out that we sold our home to save our business, like the dire like situation that we were in. And my very best friend is going to find out on Shark Tank the situation that we were in. That's how private I was keeping it,
Wow.
because it just felt like my world is crumbling. I was still posting on social media, but I wasn't letting anybody know like how dire everything was. And it's so incredible, like, making the decision to sell our home, going on Shark Tank, CBS, and like really leaning into our vulnerable story. That is something that I think is also a lost art, is like, you know, this facade that we paint on social media of like only showing the
Absolutely.
best 5 seconds of our lives, um, or like a very curated moment, when in reality, like, we're all going through something. All of us are going through something.
100%. And this is
There's
exactly the purpose of Unconversations.
totally,
And
and
I'm
there's
so grateful for you sharing that vulnerable side because nobody would know. And when you're in kind of in a very silo situation, it can become very isolating.
mhm,
And there's something I've noticed for myself as I share my story in blogs, as I share it in other podcasts that I'll be doing, is there's also something really freeing. I don't know if you've experienced that, but there's something really freeing to show that there's other parts and sides of me that I thought I shouldn't let out. But then when I did, it just so much more came to me when I sort of released that. I don't know if you experienced something very similar because something so devastating or
mhm.
devastating to you could feel that way. And then when you're releasing it, you're like, wow, I had no idea so much more would actually come my way.
Yes, 1000%. There's so much power in the vulnerability. I also, one thing that I like to say is it actually was easier for me to come out to my mom, um, than come out and sell our home, And it's like it feels like a coming out moment. It's like freeing. Like keeping that bottled up is
Sure.
hard. And so there's so much power in the vulnerability because that's how people relate. And the founder story is, it's never like a linear thing. It's always like the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows. And so I think sometimes people, I think, may look at founders and say, oh, they're so lucky. Like they
Absolutely.
have they thought of a clothing brand and they've been on Shark Tank and they've been on all these TV shows and they're getting all this exposure, but they have no idea the grit, the determination, the resilience, the tough decisions that you have to make as a founder. And I think it's important to share that story because being a founder is not for the faint of heart, but I do not regret it for 1 minute. It is such a fun ride and it's important work. I really do believe it's important work that we're doing.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you, which is why I wanted to be able to meet you further, have my audience get to know you further and your brand, which and your clothing line, which I think is fabulous. So
Mhm.
I definitely wanted to commend you and Vicky for that.
Thank
If
you.
you were to is there anything you feel at a moment of time that you would have changed something or done something differently, especially with all the adversity that you've gone through? And now you're beginning to sort of see, it's not always the light at the end of the tunnel because we always have to keep pushing. But
Yes.
is there something you feel if there was a moment in time as a COO that you were like, if I could leave a nugget with someone that wants to do a business, what would that be for you?
So it's interesting because working with my wife, we're constantly changing our hats. It's like we are like, it's like, am I talking to my wife? Am I talking to my business partner? Am I talking to
Finding
my
that
mom?
balance.
Yeah, which and we're always like interchanging that. And so, with this brand, because I had this like idea of, Vicky only being the face of it, I was always in behind the scenes. Like, I'm always the one like answering all the DMs from social media. Typically, like anything that comes in for like marketing or like collaborations, it's always me. And I was always like more comfortable behind the computer screen, like not telling my story.
Yes.
But I wish that I would have shared on podcasts like this or shared our founder story or even been front facing with Vicky a little bit more. I think that there is something to be said and celebrated about two women together as wives, and moms in business together. That was such a powerful moment for us to walk out on stage on Shark Tank holding hands. As a matter of fact, I was actually initially pushing and saying that Vicky should just go on by herself. And she looked at me
Wow.
and said, "You need to be on with me. Like, you are the other co founder and you play such a vital role." And so
Amazing.
always like slowly but surely pushed me into my own spotlight. And now that I think, Vicky represents her struggle in fashion, and it had initially started with her. But as I was sharing, when that mom had reached out and said that their teen was suicidal and, didn't smile again until they saw an ad like ours, hearing from moms or even partners, finding clothes for, you know, it resonates with me so much. I think it also shows that like what the unconditional like relationship that we have towards ourselves and the business. I think it's important for me to be front facing as well. I wish I would have done it sooner. Totally.
That's really good to hear. I appreciate you sharing that because uh, especially when it could be a couple and a married couple,
Yeah.
and even though it was her idea, and sort of finding out how to balance each other's roles, and you don't want to step on her toes, and she was sort of wants to respect you, and for you to sort of find your place. It's not running a business, it has so many components to it. It's not just about the product, but whose roles, and especially figuring out those roles when it's not just two people, but it's two women and two women that are married, and
Mm-hmm.
then on top of that to have two children. So
Yeah, it is. It's a lot. And I think that we balance it really well. We literally wake up every morning. We're like, what's the plan with the family? What's the plan with the business? Okay, break. And then we
Right.
conquer, and then we come together and we have our reflective moments at the end of the day and what we can change and improve. And it just works. I think that we have a united goal, both with the family and the business, and it's just to be successful in all areas of our lives. So I'm so glad that we're so in sync in that way.
That's wonderful. I appreciate you sharing so in depthly
Thank you.
about your journey, about your company, and these are definitely not easy topics to discuss. Before we end, I wanted to see, do you feel that there's anything else that you would like to share? I kind of want to give this moment to you, or if there's a question you would like to ask me, I am certainly here for that.
Yeah, so I think, we shared a lot of like kind of the path to, you know, unstoppable, and like when we had decided to sell our home, that decision has been monumental for our business. We have been able to see huge growth and exposure. There's so much around the corner for Dapper Boy, so much opportunity. We have our customers, we have a 51% repeat customer rate. So our customers have been excited to see even more new launches. We're right back on track, actually doing much better. And having, like I said, since Shark Tank, we've had CBS. And it's like so interesting to just be able to tell the story, not just of Dapper Boy and the clothes, but like why it means so much to us. And I think people are so invested in our story as founders that makes them like
Absolutely.
so much more invested in the mission of Dapper Boy because of what it means to us. So yeah, I just also wanted to share kind of like wrap it in a bow and say like that, yeah, it's been a really wonderful journey. And I'm sure that, again, it's not linear, right? So, like, even though it's going to be something else that's going to make this journey like a little bit bumpy but fun, and it's exciting, as we continue to grow and scale. So yeah, and we're in that documentary called Show Her the Money. It's like a really insightful documentary about um, it gives that holistic view of VCs, angel investors, and founders, but it also makes it very digestible for someone to really understand what investing is all about. So definitely check out the documentary. And I did want to ask you, what made you? It's so interesting. What I love about your podcast is the word "un." Where did that originate from?
Yeah, the word "un" actually came because usually "un" words have a very negative connotation to it.
Yes.
They don't have a sort of positive. And so when my company, as you know, is called Unconvention, and so which provides consulting and coaching services. And you really did a wonderful job encapsulating what Unconversations is about, because I do want to get into deep discussions with executives such as yourself, because there is this persona of, oh, we have this business and everything is really great and look at everything I have. But behind the curtain, it took a lot to get to that place. So Unconversations is really about having sort of a raw conversation. And also the unwords, which you did great in describing, it really gives people an opportunity to sort of dig deeper and think about themselves in maybe a different way that they haven't thought about themselves before.
Yes.
And that was really the purpose of really kind of doing something very different and getting people to look inside themselves in a different way and maybe learn something new that they didn't think about before.
You were 100% because you had me doing homework. And so it really, I think it is important to have these raw conversations. It really aligns with what we had talked about is like it's time to like get raw. It's time to really share the vulnerable parts because that's how we relate with one another.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Cherise, thank you so much for your time today. I absolutely appreciate it. And I wish Dapper Boy the utmost success and about show her the money. And I am sure people are going to love to see that documentary as well. So thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you.